I have some breaking news to share for you in the pro-life movement just filed from Students for Life, and that's what we're going to dig into today on this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Kristan Hawkins, and if you've been listening to my podcast or paying attention to any of my social media content for the past year, you will know that Students for Life strategically has been engaging to attack the proliferation of dangerous chemical abortion pills in our country. Pills that lead to injury, infertility, and death of women, and are also the drug of choice of abusers, and also now we know are polluting our environment. Not to mention, they also kill babies, and they've killed about 5 million babies since the FDA allowed these dangerous drugs, a 2-pill cocktail, to go on the market in the year 2000. We've been talking about how chemical abortions work, how they harm women, but today we're going to also get into how they're harming our environment. And I can't give you the full details of everything Students for Life has been working on when it comes to the pro-life generation attacking chemical abortion. Some of those strategies have to remain a little bit more secret longer, and I'm not a very good secret keeper, but they do have to remain kind of on the DL for a little bit longer. But I do want to let you in on a strategy that we started a few months ago with our General Counsel, Zac Kester, and I'm going to bring him on here today to kind of give you a legal update of how Students for Life is strategically engaging in a new innovative model to bring about the end of chemical abortion pills in our country. As you may know from recent news cases, chemical abortion is out there. This is now the leading cause of death in our country for children. More than half of all abortions, we know from the Alan Guttmacher Association Institute, now tell us that are being committed with chemical abortion pills. We had the Texas judge's ruling not long ago saying that the FDA has ignored its own safety standards that they recommended when they brought the first pill, chemical abortion, mifepristone, to market. And even though it has a black box warning, it has killed, that we know of, 28 women, even though we don't have a national abortion law, so we don't actually know the national abortion reporting law. If we would have one, we'd have actual statistics. Since we don't have that, we only have some stories out there, but we do know these drugs are extremely dangerous. They have killed women. And honestly, you can just go to pregnancy chat rooms across the internet and find this information for yourself. So the Texas case, the Texas decision, was significant because it was the first time where a federal judge acknowledged, and then the Fifth Circuit also upheld the decision, acknowledging that there's something dangerous about chemical abortions, and not just dangerous for children, but also dangerous for mothers, that no one in the abortion industry is talking about. And that, quite frankly, the abortion-loving mainstream media has been complicit in this cover-up of. So today I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about this environmental angle, because as you all know, if you've been following our campus tour this semester, spring semester, This is Chemical Abortion, we have been seeing a 19% minds change rate. This is our highest minds change rate ever that we've ever recorded on campuses in all of our years of doing campus tours, when we start talking to pro-choice young people about chemical abortion, how it's harming mothers and it's harming the environment. So I want to bring on my special guest, my expert here today, Zac Kester. Zac Kester is our General Counsel at Students for Life America. He is also the founder of Charitable Allies. He serves there as the General Counsel, Charitable Allies. He has a Master's of Law in LLM. He and his wife Amanda have 4 children, and they are extremely passionate about serving folks globally and in their community. The Kesters strongly support adoption and fostering children. They have 2 adopted beautiful girls from Ethiopia, and also who are older sisters of 2 of the Kester's own biological son. So they have an amazing story. Zac's bio, if you look him up, is filled with so much of his servant heart and his family's servant heart for ministering the gospel, ministering to the most vulnerable across the world and in his home state of Indiana. And we are so honored to have him on our team at Students for Life. So Zac, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Honored to be here, Kristan.
So I wanted to come on the podcast and kind of share. I've been kind of teasing it out for a while all that we've been doing with chemical abortion. We have this whole chemical abortion task force at Students for Life. It doesn't have a real sexy name, but that's it. And we meet, twice a month. We're engaging strategically to educate pro-lifers, engaging to change the culture with media and on campuses and our online digital field team. But for the legal strategy, I'm kind of always very vague about it. So I want to go into it a little bit. We started, I believe we started this process by first FOIA-ing several cities and asking if water treatment plants in those cities were testing for chemical abortion, active metabolites that we know remain, after a woman has had an abortion, they continue to remain active after, she is instructed to go to the toilet or the bathtub and flush. And so we have 22 plus years of chemically tainted blood, tissue, fecal remains that have been flushed down our toilets and our drains 5 million times.
That's right. That's exactly right. We FOIA'd something like a dozen different agencies that test dozens of wastewater treatment plants, and come to find out, we learned a lot about how they do water testing and how quickly, for example, they were able to stand up water testing for things like COVID, the COVID-19 virus, or even monkeypox for that matter.
Yeah.
When we saw that hit the news here over the last few months, and they clearly can do testing quickly. But what's equally clear is that they do not test for the metabolites of Ru-486, which is problematic, of course, because it's a very potent progesterone inhibiting drug, hormone essentially, that is intended to kill. It literally exists for the purpose of killing life, ending life. And then it's injected into our waterways, to your point, from through a woman's urine or feces, and then more importantly through the chemically tainted fetal tissue, placentas in particular, blood that's contained in the uterus, when it's passed following when she takes this drug, and they just don't test for it, and yet it is a very potent drug that we should be able to see and test for.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of our first step to see, was anyone even. We had been talking with folks about, well, what is in our water? We know there's active metabolites that remain active after they pass through a woman's system. But what we found was that no one was testing for this. None of the FOIAs came back. And by the way, a FOIA is a Freedom of Information Act. So that's what you can file with government agencies to say, hey, we want all what you're talking about, what you're doing on XYZ, this subject. And that's what we did. And we got zero positive responses, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we got responses generally, but they didn't show any testing of any of these metabolites.
Yeah, hear no evil, see no evil is pretty much the name of the game.
Correct.
That we've come to learn when it comes to chemical abortions in our country. So our next step after doing these FOIAs has been filing citizens petition. Am I right? Am I skipping a step?
No, that's correct. And we've done 3 now. One in November, one in December, and one today.
Yes, absolutely. And I want you to first explain, what does a citizen petition mean and why is it an effective strategy? Because we've been filing citizens petitions with the FDA, asking them to stop the distribution of mifepristone because of its dangers on women and the environment. And so I want you to go through, because each citizen petition is a little bit different. But I think first explain, because when you first told me about citizen petitions, I was like, oh, what is it? Just like an online petition? You write it, like a bunch of people sign their name to it. Like no one's going to care at the FDA. I mean, this is a weaponized FDA that's clearly pro-abortion. So tell the audience what a citizen petition is and the importance of it.
Sure, absolutely. I think you're exactly right to start with this concept of just an online collection of signatures to tell some public official how you feel about them or some action they took. And so it's very easy, to your point, to, because of that word petition, to sort of confuse the two. But citizen petition is actually a formal administrative process in front of the FDA. So the Administrative Procedures Act, which is a very boring federal law, sets forth the processes that must be followed and that federal agencies must follow to create various remedies for parties who want to present grievances to that federal agency. The method that the FDA has chosen through its regulations to create that administrative relief is called a citizen's petition. So to start off, then what that means is to
So they
start.
have to respond. They can't just like ignore this.
Well, they can ignore it, as they did with, for example, the American Association of OBGYN for 16 years. But if they ignore it beyond the regulatorily defined 180 days, then in practice, it could be deemed denied by a court, and then that would allow one to go to court. The bottom line is that a party that wants to get a federal agency to do something has to formally ask that federal agency to do something. And in this case, it's the FDA and it's the citizen petition process. Then, once that federal agency doesn't do the thing that's been asked or denies it or whatever, then the party has the right, because they've exhausted their administrative remedies in front of that administrative agency, to go to court and ask the court to compel some sort of action, or to declare the original action invalid, for example.
And that was what's significant. So a couple of weeks back, when on Good Friday, that Texas federal judge, he issued a stay on mifepristone because what he said was, very beginning in the lawsuit was, APLO, American Association of OBGYNs, and ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, our friends at ADF, they brought forward this lawsuit against the FDA because for 16 years, APLO has been asking these questions about, the danger, what is the danger to women? We can't be just willy-nilly giving out these pills that we know obviously kill babies, but they can kill women. And the judge even said, like, I wouldn't even be issuing this today if the FDA had addressed this. But for 16 years, they've chosen to ignore thousands of pro-life OBGYNs across the country.
That's exactly right. And that delay, can function as a denial. Right. We've heard this phrase, sort of, justice delayed is justice denied. And,
That's right.
And there is a due process right to process in front of, adequate protections, procedural protections in front of that administrative agency. So where the FDA gives itself sort of unlimited extensions, to the tune of years or decades or what have you, at some point that's, they have denied that petition that's in front of them, and thus administrative remedies have been exhausted. So what we've done with SFLA then is we have presented 3 different citizens petitions, which means 3 different formal requests for action or to modify some prior rulemaking, for example. We've done that 3 times now, and in November, December, and this month.
Tell me the November one.
Absolutely. We asked that the FDA include a provision of prescriber requirements for mifepristone. So anytime a prescriber would prescribe mifepristone for a woman who's seeking an abortion, we asked that the FDA include a catch kit and red bag medical waste requirement. And essentially, as you know, women are being told, don't look, just flush. And after they pass the fetal tissue and the placenta and things into the toilet, they then are being told, don't look at it, just flush it. Well, that then means that the doctors and the providers are all but instructing the women, and perhaps even actually instructing the women, to pollute the environment. Because what happens to wastewater? Well, when we flush the toilet or when we take a shower or what have you, it goes down the pipes, and either it goes into our septic system, or it goes into the wastewater treatment facility down the road, across town or what have you, and then it's treated over the course of days and even weeks, depending on the plant. And then the treated water is then ejected back into the water table, the water of our country. So it's recycled, comes back around, and we drink it, or it's put out into the surface water and animals drink it and swim in it and live in it, or it is put into our aquifers where we drink it and fill our swimming pools with it and all the rest. So at the end of the day, a woman has an abortion caused in part by the mifepristone drug, which is this highly potent progesterone inhibiting hormone. The substance, the contents of that, are passed into the wastewater. The wastewater is treated in the general sense, so fluoride is put in and the bacteria is removed. But what's not removed is these hormones, these potent progesterone inhibiting hormones. And remember that mifepristone is unique. It's a manufactured synthetic drug, and it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. The three active metabolites of mifepristone don't exist anywhere else in the world except after mifepristone has passed through a woman's body. And and so we can test with a high degree of confidence where this is at and how it's polluting our environment. And what we've said to the FDA is, look, FDA, the law requires you to have done this kind of environmental testing and things. And in order to stop these environmental harms, birth defects in animals, et cetera, what you need to do is require prescribers to to have a catch kit where a woman passes, the contents of her uterus into the red bag, and then sends that contents back to the prescriber for proper disposal. If we think about what happens at an abortion clinic, a brick and mortar abortion clinic, where there's a surgical abortion, the fetus and uterine contents are in fact disposed of pursuant to medical waste laws. In fact, we've seen prosecutions of egregious situations where abortionists are taking the fetuses home and stuff like that, right? We've seen those kinds of prosecutions. We've
Yeah.
also seen when a woman, and this happened to my wife and I, we miscarried at one point, and when a woman is miscarrying and she sees her provider, and the provider says, "I'm terribly sorry," right, and all of that. In most states, a woman is sent either at the hospital, miscarries at the hospital, or is sent home to finish miscarrying, and is often sent home with a red bag medical waste kit. So even fetal tissue and placentas that are not chemically tainted are collected in a red bag and taken back to the provider for proper disposal. So what we said to the FDA is, look, there's all these situations in which red bag medical waste is used. So you need to do it here. And they have not responded to this one. Their deadline to respond is approximately the 15th of next month. I believe it's the
Okay.
14th of next month is their deadline to respond.
So
And
the 14th of May.
yes, because we filed November
Okay.
15th. So yes, approximately 14th of May.
Okay. This is significant because, we have laws in our country about how we treat the disposal of body parts. Like if I would have my arm amputated, and I'd say, "Hey, give me my arm. I want to take it home and bury it in my backyard." The hospital would be like, "No, you can't do that because you can't just like bury your arm a couple feet in your backyard. Like
That doesn't
there's
work that way.
certain
Yep.
rules about how deep, right? You have to bury
Yes.
human like body parts, right? Isn't it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, it's typically 6 feet, and depending on the state, it has to be, in a lead line or, in a coffin and that, what have you. And to your point, like if you not only couldn't bury your arm, you wouldn't be given the option, right? If a doctor amputated your arm, the doctor is legally required to make sure he or she is the progenitor of that waste. And the progenitor of the waste, the prescriber, the one who did the surgery, for example, or the facility where that occurred at, is required to do the waste. So if you said, "Hey, I want to take my arm home," they would say, "Absolutely not. You can't.
Wow.
It has to be disposed of a certain sort of way." And so that's all we're asking is that the FDA just apply existing law as it's supposed to be applied.
Unbelievable. Okay, so they haven't responded.
Correct.
What will and we've in the meantime we've actually saw we had a state legislator in West Virginia and I think soon will be in Idaho introduced. We rewrote with your team a sample piece of legislation because we think we can at least get state legislatures start introducing these laws, saying even if our state is quote unquote abortion free like in West Virginia, we know thanks to the weaponized Biden administration these drugs are still flowing into our state. This would be a significant game changer though if states pass laws saying if you are generating medical waste and sending chemical abortion pills into our state, you also have to then send a catch kit, and then you're going to have a facility, an abortion clinic somewhere where she then drops off her dead child and
That's
the
right.
placenta to be properly disposed of, which would then theoretically get rid of the ability to just do these mail order abortions and there's no facility, no doctor involved at all, which would save countless lives. Okay, so that's citizen petition 1. We're still waiting on it. If they do not respond by May 14th, what's our next step?
Yeah, so there's a 6-year statute of limitations, and from the date of their action or inaction, which again would be approximately May 14th, we would be entitled to file a lawsuit to compel,
Mm.
and a federal judge could add this requirement. What you'll note is that this provision is an environmental provision. This provision does not change. It doesn't require the judge to consider a medical expert's analysis about the effect of these pills on a woman or on a fetus or whatever. This literally is a medical waste, keep the water clean analysis. And the other thing I would say about this is the target of our request for relief in this citizen's petition is the progenitor of the waste, the prescriber. The woman is not in any way a subject of or a target of the relief that we're seeking. It's the provider, the progenitor of the waste, the person who provides the prescription to the woman. That person is who is responsible for the proper disposal of the waste at the outset, and we're just asking the FDA to enforce that requirement against the providers. And so I just want to be very clear that
Yeah.
we understand the realities of abortion, and our focus here is the progenitor of the waste.
That's perfect. And if you want to read this for citizen petition, because it's epic, you can go to thisischemicalabortion.com, and once you're on that site, you just click Action Center, and you'll see a link for citizen petitions. We have all 3 citizen petitions up there. Okay, so keep sending your donations to Students for Life, because lawsuits are likely in our future. Okay, second citizen petition was the December citizen petition. What happened? What did we say, and what happened with that one?
So in that one similarly tracked the earlier citizens petition that had been filed by APLOG, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, as well as the American College of Pediatricians in 2019, and that one was denied. And that one was denied.
The FDA just flat out denied it pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, within a month, I believe the FDA denied it, because what they said was, look, this is just a rinse and repeat of what APLOG and American College of Pediatricians requested, and we've already answered it and we've already considered it, so we're just going to deny it out of hand. And they did that, like I said, within about a month, so sometime in January, actually on January 3rd. So we submitted it December 13th, and then on January 3rd, they denied it outright for the reasons that I've just described. And this one is the one that really tracks a lot of the analysis that APLOG and American College of Pediatricians submitted. It also tracks a lot of the analysis that the federal judge in Texas already did, right? Moving it from 11 weeks down to the 7 weeks that was originally approved in 2000, administered only under the supervision of a physically present physician after doing an ultrasound, multiple office visits, all of those kinds of REMS or safety precautions that the FDA put in place in 2000. That's essentially what we were asking to go back to, and they just denied it out of hand.
Okay, so yeah, they just didn't want to do it. Now, this third one that we just announced today, and I know this episode isn't going to air right away. It's going to air in a few days probably. This one is the one that I was really excited for the first one, and I knew the second one's obviously very important about the safety of women, but we knew, the FDA was already fighting APLOG and the American College of Pediatricians on it. This petition that we filed today is completely innovative in the sense that no one in the pro-life movement up until this point has made this legal argument. This is, I'm going to brag a little bit on our team, but this is probably the most innovative thing we've seen in the pro-life movement in years. Certainly the most innovative way, because you have to think about in terms of the pro-life movement, we can't fight chemical abortion the way we're fighting surgical abortion. You can't go and protest and do a 40 Days for Life campaign, which are amazing and effective. And, where do you do them a chemical abortion? You're going to do every post office in the country. Who's prescribing? You're going to try to find the prescribers. We have to find new innovative ways to fight back against the abortion industry, because quite frankly, they know how effective our protests and our campaigns have been, and the prayer campaigns, for example, have been in front. Abby Johnson talks about this openly, about how the abortion rates, drop, it can go to 75% no-show rate on the days that there's an active 40 Days for Life campaign and a Sidewalk Advocates campaign out in front of these brick and mortar facilities. So we're looking for at Students for Life these post-Roe strategies that are completely innovative. So share with everybody what this third citizen petition has just done.
Yeah, so this has started the clock. 180 days from now, we can sort of compel
I am literally
FDA
going to make
action.
a calendar for this. I'm making a calendar.
I've got a
this
countdown app on my phone, actually, so I'm that excited about this one. Basically, there's a law called the Endangered Species Act, and Section 7A of the Endangered Species Act requires that any federal agency that takes any action, and that's literally a quote. The word is agency action. That's the defined phrase, and I'll unpack that here in a second. Any federal agency that takes agency action is required to comply with the Endangered Species Act, Section 7A, which requires that they do environmental assessments to assess the impact of their action or potential impact of their action or proposed action on endangered species. Remember that there's approximately 1,500 endangered species. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as the National Marine Fisheries Service, maintain that list. It's primarily maintained by the Fish and Wildlife Service. And the FDA is required to work directly with the FWS, Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a division, if you will, a service within the EPA. So really the FDA and EPA have to work together, and they have to do all these environmental assessments if there is essentially a chance that the agency action could affect the environment. And then they have to basically prove that it doesn't. Back in 2000, the FDA, the only thing they did from an environmental analysis was say that, okay, there'll be a little bit of packaging that would need to be put in the trash. And that packaging will just be disposed of just as any other pill packaging, and that's sufficient. And the FDA accepted that description of the environmental assessments or environmental impact as sufficient. The problem is that's woefully insufficient. And then later, 2016, 2019, 2021, 2023, in each of those years, the FDA took additional action as it relates to the approval of mifepristone and the removal or modification of the REMS, the safety precautions, all of that. In every single one of those, all four of those, 16, 19, 21, and 23, they did nothing about the environment.
So 5 times.
5 times.
5 times.
Okay. 5 times total. 5 times they did nothing or next to nothing, right? Just a little bit of litter is not enough. You have to do water testing. You have to assess the effect of these hormones, these chemicals on wildlife, on turtles and eels and bald eagles and red foxes and salmon. You have to go test the effect of these chemicals on those species. And and as you remember, as we talked about, at the beginning here, this is a potent endocrine disrupting, progesterone inhibiting hormone. It is intended to stop hormones from having their desired function or their intended function. And progesterone is a naturally occurring hormone. It occurs in humans, but it also occurs in animals. And progesterone then, the progesterone inhibitor of mifepristone stops the nutrients in the blood from passing adequately from the woman into the placenta and then into the baby and into the fetus. And that inhibitor that inhibits the passage of the oxygen and the nutrients in the blood, and that is the mechanism of action that kills the fetus.
Which, by the way, just to back up, this pill was developed specifically to end life.
Correct.
It is not a cancer treating drug.
No.
There has been other uses for mifepristone, the second drug in the chemical abortion cocktail, but there's no other use for mifepristone, the first drug, which is the one we're talking about. Even though all the Democrats and liberals keep saying that mifepristone is used for cancer, it's not. This drug was developed to end life.
That's right. It's not used for cancer. It does have one exceedingly rare other use, and it is a genetic disorder that results in sky high levels of cortisol in the body, which is a natural inflammatory response. But that is an exceedingly rare usage. And, you're not talking about 5 million doses, right? And it's also not used in the strength that it's used to end pregnancy. So, you know, the reality is our environment can't handle 5 million doses. And so that's why they have to do these environmental assessments because of agency action. And you remember, it's like, okay, well, what's the definition of agency action? It is extremely broad. Any permits, any regulatory changes, any like it is extremely
Yeah.
broad. And there's
Which
this
we know five
correct,
times
correct,
at least they have done the agency action.
correct,
And so the
correct,
burden is on them to prove it's
correct.
not in the water.
And not only that it's not in the water, but it can't even get there. So there's a fascinating case dealing with salmon and salmon fisheries, and ultimately the FDA was like, you haven't successfully proven that stormwater won't make the salmon farm with the genetically modified salmon get in the surface water, and that is enough to shut it down, to shut down the salmon farms. And I mean, it is amazing. I'm sorry, the EPA did that, not the FDA. The EPA did that. It is amazing the power of this Endangered Species Act. One thing I think is worth noting is that many on the right don't like how how powerful the environmental laws are because they're commonly used against business interests. Someone else on my team had a school down the street where her children were not allowed to play on the playground because they weren't allowed to build a playground because they had to protect the habitat of the snail. And that's sort of locally frustrating and whatever. So we've all seen those kinds of experiences, and there's some degree of frustration there. But the reality is that this law is used, it's called critter protection. It's used by the left to go against business interests, is the most common use, oil and gas and whatever else. What this is doing, though, is this is using well-established existing laws about the environment against the left. That's what's so wonderful about this is we're not making new law.
And it's not just that we want to attack the left, we want to end chemical abortion, save babies, and we do care about the environment.
Correct.
I mean, we want to save our planet for the future tiny humans.
Correct.
And that is, I think, left and right, everyone can agree on
Agreed.
that fact.
Agreed.
But the added bonus is we're actually doing something that the left does to the right all the time, and it's glorious. But
Well, and if we think about it, like just step back and think about it sort of rationally, and we don't have the causal links yet, but you know, women, young women start puberty almost 2 years earlier now than they did
that's right.
25 years ago.
Yep.
Infertility is through the roof, and I'm not talking just for the people the women who take the chemical abortion drug. I'm talking generally.
It's for anyone.
Infertility is
Yeah.
through the roof, and sperm count for men is down by more than 50% in that same period of time. And at the end of the day, like potentially, if one just thinks about it rationally, could an extremely potent, you know, progesterone inhibiting chemical in our water be having this effect? Sure, it could. Now let's go prove it up with environmental studies.
Yeah, and the FDA has to prove it. That's the thing. The
That's the
burden
thing.
of proof is actually on the FDA
That's right.
and the manufacturer of this drug. I mean, I sent you an article just 2 weeks ago about, it was called Forever Chemicals Are Helping Drive America's Fertility Crisis. And it was about one town in Minnesota. I actually know where this town was. I used to live in Minnesota. And they found this shockingly high infertility rate in this city. And after a year, they put all of these filters on the town's water, and a year the infertility rates was almost back to normal, like what it should, what normally across the country. And so they're like, wow, there's definitely something in the water. 2022 analysis stated that contamination in U.S. drinking water has been dramatically underestimated in previous studies, even including those done by the EPA. And so these forever chemicals, they call them PFASs, were detected in 97%, in the blood of 97% of U.S. residents, according to the CDC in one report. And the fertility experts are saying high PFASs exposure dramatically affects someone else's chances of having children. And they interviewed all of these infertility IVF doctors talking about reproductive toxicity. A landmark 2020 study, 50,000 person Minnesota was the first to establish a causal link between these forever chemicals and high rates of infertility, premature birth, and low birth weights. The city of Oakdale, this was the city I was talking about, which was like down the street from where I lived, was used for analyzing the effect of infertility from 2006 to 2001, 2006. Babies born during the study period were 36% more likely to be underweight, 45% more likely to be born prematurely, and women of childbearing age suffered reduced fertility rates up to 25% during this time. I mean, like, this is
Correct.
This is secular stuff. This was not like a pro-life article. They were interviewing IVF doctors, on this, but everyone agrees there's something in our water.
Well, yeah, and this is the Florida International University study, right? And that's one of the leading freshwater programs in the nation. And if you think about it, it makes all the sense in the world. Southeast Florida is where their freshwater resources division headquarters is. I mean, you're talking near the Everglades, low lying, lots and lots of water. And what's the effect this stuff has on all the sorts of different little critters and manatees and all the rest. And that's some of the stuff that they study. And they just published a study last week, I think it was, with very similar findings to what you just read about the Minnesota study.
Yeah. I love my manatees. I have a manatee sticker right here. Save the baby manatees. Yeah, I mean, I think this is important. So this is going to shake things up. There was already, like, Politico came out, as soon as we released it. There's going to be a lot of articles written about this because the left is genuinely terrified that we're using their own tactics against them. The next step is going to be to wait for this 180 days to see if the FDA responds. I sort of highly doubt that the FDA is going to respond because they don't want to respond. Then the next step will be, a lawsuit, which is why we were so glad to have more than 150 Students for Life groups actually join in co-filing the citizens petition with us. Are there any other legal steps that we've got on the docket after this?
Yeah. So yeah, there is. We're preparing another citizens petition, and that citizen petition is focusing on Clean Water Act, which is a similar concept, but the Clean Water Act is a different set of remedies. And a different sort of tack to take here, right? Unlike the Endangered Species Act, which really shifts the burden to the FDA, this one has a slightly different set of remedies available to it. It's a different law altogether. The trigger threshold is a little different. So we'll be filing an additional citizen petition dealing with the Clean Water Act here in the next couple of months, I would imagine. That's a strategy that we're doing. And we're continuing our FOIA approach to identify, keep trying to identify sort of what's in the water. And then to your point, litigation is really some of the next steps, and it's trying to figure out, what that looks like. We know that, for example, there were to the citizen petition we filed in December, there were hundreds of signatories to that, hundreds of parties to that. To the one we filed today was over 150 signatories, all student groups of SFLA all over the country. All of them were. And so then it turns to litigation after that. And litigation is a fairly long slog in the sense of environmental litigation. But at the end of the day, this is an incredibly compelling strategy, and I'm actually thrilled to sort of be at the tip of the spear with you on this one.
Yeah, it's exciting for me. I mean, I think we have a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to chemical abortion. I shared with you the red bag medical waste legislation that we've already written. We've got introduced in West Virginia. We're going to see a lot of states, hopefully, and hopefully you all will pass the word to your state representatives to introduce similar legislation, especially in red states that have pretty much prevented all abortions. This is still an issue that concerns your water and your environment. We saw our landmark bill finally get signed into law in Wyoming that prevents all chemical abortions in a state that took 3 years of Students for Life actions work. We're going to have other states pick that up. So we've got this legislative angle working. We've got the educational angle of educating pro-lifers about chemical abortion, the grassroots about what chemical abortion is, how it's not Plan B, just answering basic questions, educating the media and educating politicians to speak up against this, and then also changing hearts and minds on this. And then we have this whole legal strategy, which I think we're just really only at the beginning of, and there's a lot more that we can do. I think the bottom line for all of this that we had this conversation today is chemical abortion pills not only kill babies and harm women, they're harming our environment. We as pro-lifers do care about the environment because as pro-lifers, we want there to be a whole civilization that survives beyond us, and we're protecting the earth and clean water and animals for our children. This is an issue that we all should come around, pro-life or pro-choice, and care about. I think that the other lesson we have to take home is we in the pro-life movement have to continue to think of innovative ways to attack the abortion lobby, because the abortion lobby certainly knows that the days of brick and mortar surgical abortion facilities are out, and that the majority of Americans reject second and third trimester abortions. The fight is going to be and will come down to first trimester abortions, and with half of all abortions in 2021 being chemical abortions, it's going to be well over 75-80%. This is the future of the abortion industry. It is here now, and we have to change our game and change our tactics and the way we're fighting this. So Zac, it's an honor to be partnered with you. Thank you for taking on this huge new endeavor on behalf of our team at Students for Life and the entire pro-life generation. I'm going to have you on in the future to give us an update, because I hear your legal updates all the time, and I have to admit it's hard to keep track of all. So it was a great refresher for me. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, even when Zac was talking about how wastewater gets out into our environment, if you go to thisischemicalabortion.com, click the Learn tab, and there's an animated graphic that was in The Atlantic, not a pro-life source, about how water gets easily contaminated in our country. You can also, when you go to that website, thisischemicalabortion.com, click Take Action. You can read the lengthy citizen petition with all the facts, all the things you need to back up. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll re-watch and re-listen to this episode, because I am going to probably 3 more times until I digest all of this information Zac presented us. But keep going on your social media, keep engaging in conversations, keep showing people that chemical abortion is not safer than Tylenol, it's not safer than ibuprofen, and it kills babies, harms mother, and harms the environment, as the drug of choice of sex abusers in our country. We have to fight back against misinformation we're hearing every single day on TikTok and Instagram and everywhere on social media, and even in the mainstream media. Thank you, Pro-Life Gen. I look forward to seeing all of your Instagram posts.